peripheries around the sort of central government controlled areas where violence is breaking out as it relates to minority communities to some capacity, right? Baloch on the one hand and the Druze and Bedouins on the other hand. Because the Bedouins, even though they're Sunni, are kind of minority community themselves because they have a very different lifestyle from, say, urban Sunni Syrians, right?
Yes.
So the question at this point is what principles do we have as Christians that can help us build a nation and a society which is a good place for minorities?
I've been thinking a lot about recently in light of all of the internal conflicts within the United States, right? So political conflicts, the left versus the right. I mean, if you've been paying any attention to the news in the last week, there's a move to prosecute Barack Obama, right? Which, if you do that, I mean, I'm serious, they might actually do it. So if they do it, then, where does that leave us? But the principle I keep coming back to is blessed are the peacemakers, because peacemakers, those who make peace are essentially the sons of God. So, you know, we we if we come to a point where we have disagreements, but we go into the disagreement saying, I have to come out with my vantage point on top, right? Like there's no, then that means that there's no concessions, there's no negotiation, there's no nothing. I'm going to win, right? I'm going to stop my opposition, and that's it. They're going to be the disenfranchised ones, not me. And that's not what a peacemaker does, right? There's a spirit of like, let's find a place of peace where we can agree, right? And I think for the most part, again, the country has flaws, it's had flaws since its founding. But I do believe that in its political system, the way that it was set up, all the way back at the founding of the country, there was this idea that we would try to come to a place of peace. We would try to come to a place of agreement, um, and create a system that allowed us to get there, right? Not a system that stomped the opposition, that gave them a voice, right? Let them speak, you know, put it before the ballot, right? Like let people vote on it. So I think uh, if we focus on trying to find peace, we'll get to safety. We'll get to a place where it's safe for people.
Yeah, I think one way I think is how we guarantee peace for minorities is awareness. And I would allow me to blame Christianity, not Christianity, but people and their implementations, right? If you go to a remote place, not remote, but like United States countryside, right? You see that minorities are not welcome there. They're not seen as part of them, equal, whatever, not protected. For one night, maybe for 2 nights. I'm not going deep down inside in this debate whether it's true or not, but there is a faction. No one can deny that. On the other hand, that is true with every country in the world. When there is less education, doesn't. For example, let me say a counter example. See, right now in UAE, minorities are treated with, if not all equality, there is some kind of, as I mentioned in earlier, there is nowhere you're guaranteed equality in any country, but there is protection for them. People from Christian backgrounds, people from Jewish backgrounds, people from Islamic backgrounds go there, live there. There is safety and protection for them, right? So I think the idea of protecting minorities lie within awareness and acceptance towards others, right? And that acceptance towards others, of course, it comes from biblical ideas, but it can also come from Islamic ideas too. Depends on how you want to see it.
So I think that as far as like minorities and people who like hate them in America, I actually think it's worse now than it was 10 years ago.
Well, I think that you're probably right. What I keep thinking about though is that the way that the country has kind of abandoned um, over the past, I don't know, let's say 15 years, right? The idea of what like legalization, naturalization, legal entry into the country, all of that stuff has been just kind of was widely ignored, for a long time. I mean, like the border was open for a long time before Biden, before Trump, before, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
with this has been an ongoing problem. So when you get people who are coming in and, they're minorities, they're coming here for a better life, or they're coming here, maybe they're not coming here for a better life. Maybe they're running, right, from their crimes. But my point is, uh, you know, for the longest time, the minorities all played well together, right? And, maybe the majority looked down on the minority, but the minorities were like, in kind of
Yeah. Tagging along, right?
sync with each other, right? And there are other exceptions, like there's African Americans and Asians have had like hostility because Asians move into like areas that were traditionally African American, but before that those areas were Italian, right? They were,
Yeah.
so I think that there's just a cycling through of these things, and I think that um what's happened now is like there's just been chaos, and anytime that you make chaos your policy, you're going to get chaos.
So here's what I would argue has happened. I argue on a spectrum here. I would say in the classical Islamic framework for this, non-Muslims are second-class citizens,
Absolutely.
right? That's true in the Charter of Medina. It's true. It's definitely true in the Pact of Omar, and
Right.
that's generally been true in classical Islamic thinking. You've got protection, but you certainly do not have anything approximating equal rights.
Yes, that's not.
Um, Again, under some rulers, that would be different. Like Muawiyah, for example, Christians were treated well. His prime minister was a Christian, right? So there's been lots of Muslim rulers who have been great to minorities, but in general, classical Sunni thought on this treats them as second-class citizens. What the secular West has done is it started based on some biblical principles, because the Bible teaches that everyone is based on the image of God, and in the New Testament, there's lots of work on not imposing Jewish culture on the new Gentile believers. Like the whole book of Galatians is about this, right? You let them come as they are, and
Book of Acts.
right in the book of Acts, and they're your brothers, right? They're equal with you despite their cultural differences. Right. And so that's a church thing. That's not a nation thing. But those principles influenced Christian law, right? Even the Torah, it says, if a foreigner comes and lives with you, you should treat him well. You should not wrong him. You should have one law for the native and one law for the sojourner, right? The same law for the native and the foreigner,
Provided they don't worship idols
openly.
right? Like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
it was a little.
So
That,
it's not
you
like,
got to put that out there.
yeah,
Like,
it's not like modern American law, right?
right,
It's
right,
different.
right.
Also, what you have with Christianity is not imposing Christianity on people through coercion, right? There is nowhere in the New Testament it's Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my king were of this world, my servants would be fighting."
Right.
So what secularism has done is taken those ideas from Christianity, but it's jettisoned Christianity. And so what you have is a value that all cultures have something good to contribute to the world, but you don't have a framework and you don't have a line that says, actually, this part of your culture is bad and we don't tolerate it here.
Right. I mean, I think the idea of pluralism, which is like it's on the coins, right? E pluribus unum, like out of many one, um, was the idea that people could come here with different perspectives. I mean, the Puritans came, and they had different religious ideas from, they came to try and find a place where they could practice their religion freely.
Because they were persecuted
right
in England.
in England, in Amsterdam, the Dutch did it. Like they were not allowed to practice their religion, and then when they came here, the ways that they practiced their religion, I mean, there was no one else. You know what I mean? So there's Michael Medved wrote a couple of books about like how Christianity was practiced early, in the colonies and stuff like that. And it's fascinating, right? But there's also no pushback.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
So what I'm arguing is to have like true tolerance and good treatment of minorities, you need to have a host culture that knows what it is. So the problem in England, especially right now, is that British culture doesn't know what it is anymore.
Right.
So it cannot say this is what we do and don't tolerate. This is what we will and won't accept. It's too nebulous.
Right.
Whereas the UAE, for counterexample, is doing a great job. You know what the deal is there when you live there,
Right.
right? You know that you can basically practice your own religion,
Right.
but you do not criticize the government, and you don't go preaching religious ideas in the streets. And if you and you know that when you go there.
And also, yeah, I will also imply on what you said earlier. It's all interpretations, and it's all on like how you want to see it. We call hardcore Sharia law. Yes, there is those things, but again, in Quran, I have not seen that there is a talk of like how Muslims are superior than non-Muslims in general, right? When it comes to living in a state, right? Quran does not give an idea of the state, right? It's all interpretations. It's all hadith, and hadith, of course, is not word of God, right? So one can argue that it all comes down to interpretation and awareness. So where there are more, just in the United States, how the side of Islam that I came across was completely different than what I kind of grew up with.
Oh my gosh, it's practiced differently everywhere.
Right?
Everywhere it's practiced differently.
Yes, that's my
Absolutely.
point. Like how you see the scripture and how you implement, and that goes to Christianity. For example, the Christians here may have difference, not to say in beliefs, but practices than someone living in Idaho, northern Idaho.
And I would say too, like where America is headed with its Christianity could very well wind up where Europe is.
Yeah,
Right.
it
Like
could.
this, particularly with the way the culture is shifted and everything else like that, where you have this kind of like really small minority of people who I guess are biblically observant, and then the rest of it is just culture.
Yeah. So what I would say is that because the American government and the American culture has not had enough clarity to be able to say to people who are coming here, we accept this, we do not accept this. So that, and because they haven't had enough filters, bad things from other cultures have crept in here. Like as you and I have experienced with arranged marriages and stuff like that, and having to kind of get people out of those situations. And when you allow that kind of stuff, what that does is it breeds resentment between people who've lived here for a long time and the minority communities that are there as well.
Yeah, and I mean, let's not just peg everything on racism either. People are worried about their futures. They're worried about their children's futures. They're worried about the country that their children are going to grow up in. You want your children to grow up in a stable environment. You want them to have opportunity and everything else like that. It's easy to go, and it's their fault, right? It's easy to go, and it's their fault. That's why I
Right.
can't have this. But I think if you get down to the base of it, a lot of people react in fear because their own like futures or their progeny future, right? Like the future of the Raymond children or the
Cons.
or the Khans or the Uchkuns or whatever, is like, well, what are they going to grow up in, right?
Right.
Like what world do I want them to grow up in? And what's important is to not just sit there and go, well, they got to go, right? Sure, I heard it put this way. I think it was Arnold Schwarzenegger who put it, right? He was on The View and he said it, and he was talking about like coming to the country. They were trying to like get him to agree with, the riots that were happening in Los Angeles and all this other stuff. And he said, when you come to this country, you should come with respect for the ideas and laws of that country.
Exactly.
Right. He talked about his experience in America, which, is not everyone's experience. I mean, he became freaking mega action star, right? I'll be back, like get to the chopper. I can go do that all night, right? But the idea is that, when you come to the country, like the idea is that you can, in America, you can maintain your identity, but you have to assimilate to the laws
Laws of
right?
the land. You have to
Laws of the
respect
land. You have
the
to
land.
you have to respect the laws of the land, because everybody is being counted on to respect the laws of the land.
And that's true for everyone everywhere. And
Right.
therefore, sorry to cut you off
No,
there.
you're
My
not.
in-laws, there are a bunch of people out of there, and there's a white lady who recently visited Turkey,
Right.
Turkey, and like she wrote a whole post that how terrible Turkey is and how they should be doing like what United States do. I mean, like this is so ridiculous.
Well,
I was about to say that.
listen, that is a long-standing American argument, though, right? Like, I ever since I've been in this country, everyone in America thinks that, well, they ought to do it like us. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
that's not new.
Right. When you say to other people that you have to respect our laws when you're in our country, then that applies to you when you go to their country.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a dual citizen, right? So I'm a
Yes.
dual citizen, and I know that when I go to Turkey, the United States does not acknowledge Turkey does not acknowledge my dual citizenship. I am essentially a Turkish citizen when I am in country, right? That's it. The United States doesn't play into it. When I try to pass the border with my American passport, they're not interested in that. They want my Turkish citizenship card, right? So, I have to play by their rules, right? I have to say, I can't just sit there and go, well, I'm an American, like
Bend to my will.
right. You know what I mean? Well, I mean, I think that the hard part, the justification for that line of reasoning is that um, those parts of the world have struggled with their freedoms. You know what I mean? They've struggled to have like sustained democracies. Like they've struggled to implement technology. You would look at it from the American point of view and say they're not keeping up with the rest of the world, because you look at, we developed iPhones, you know what I mean? And they're over there still, trying to chop each other's heads off. So, regardless of whether or not it's true or not, you know what I mean? That seems to be part of the built-in sentiment.
Yeah,
But
but
as
you're
far
not the police of the world, right?
well, I mean, I'm not even getting into that, because forget about like who's involved where, right? Like if you were just somebody sitting, like a kid growing up in New Jersey like I was, and you would look at the chaos going on in places like Afghanistan, where my father was from, you know what I mean? And places like Iran, the Iran-Iraq war, I caught the tail end of that when I was a kid, the overthrowing of the Shah, right? The returning of the hostages from, in the 80s. And I could go on and on, the first Gulf War, second Gulf War, all of these different things. You look at the instability there,
Yeah.
right? And you don't necessarily look at it and go, well, thank God I have that here. You know what I mean? That's not necessarily your first play. You're like, if they only had, what we had, maybe it wouldn't be like that. And, I heard a comedian say it the other day. He was like, well, like everybody got, this is not my opinion, but everybody would say like, well, God forbid we went over there and tried to show them a way where they weren't trying to kill themselves, and now we're the bad guy, right? Like essentially what he was saying. Listen, I know it's not that simple. He said it. I didn't say it.
We got to wrap this up. But the argument I would make is that while Americans in the West shouldn't be going over and kind of like meddling in everyone's cultures, the best thing we can do is be a city on a hill. Like do it well here. Right. And people will want to copy it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Be the example setter.
And what we need to kind of regain is a sense as both a government structure and a culture that says, you're welcome here with conditions. And the place I hope we land, and again, we need to land here,
right.
Is that what we're seeing in our culture right now is a reaction to being too tolerant. And there's a happy medium where we can be welcoming without being rolled over by other cultures in this country, where we can have a law which allows people who are willing to assimilate to the laws, and a culture that values having diversity here, but knows what its identity and host culture is.
And as an immigrant, I can say amen to that. Like, totally.
Guys, thank you for listening to Christ and Caliphate. We'll be back next time.